Hi, welcome to the iAssist Lightning Talks. I know this is a popular event for many of us, and our presenters have 5 minutes to talk about a project, and we will answer questions as we go through the chat and at the end if you'd like. So the first presenter is Maha Al-Siraj. She's the cataloging officer at the Qatar National Library and a graduate of Library and Information Studies from the University College of London, Qatar. She is interested in studying digital libraries and metadata. Thank you very much, Maha.
This project is very important for students and researchers and academic researchers, of course, who are studying the Gulf region and its history. Before that, these collections were only stored in the British Library, but now this historical information that includes maps, archives, photographs, sound recording, manuscripts, and more are available. They are in different topics like politics, trade, and even diaries of key people in the history. Till date, there are over 1 million images that are created in the website. Some 475,000 pages are from the India Office Records and the archives of the East India Company that goes from the mid-18th century. And the selection criteria, description, cataloging, and even translation of these records and digitalization of them are done in the British Library by the QDL team. And the website has the data of these materials and collections in both Arabic and English. The content available now in the website is from the first phase, which has reached 950,000 images, and still they are digitizing till date, doing the digitization in the British Library, and the next phase, which is ongoing now, for 1,125,000 pages of historical documents. Once all the digitization phases are complete, the Qatar National Library will host the material of the in their own servers, and the development and maintenance of the website will be done in Qatar. Since the launch, the portal was visited by 5.5 million visitors and over 800,000 user sessions, generating nearly 6 million page views. This is the website if anyone wants to visit and have a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Awesome. Great. I think, Lawrence, you're going next.
Yeah, my turn to introduce. So Lindy Tessema Anderson is our next speaker. So if you want to start sharing your screen. Lindy has been at the Danish National Archives since 2018 as a coordinator for health data. Lindy guides researchers and students to find health-related data within the DNA, which is Danish National Archive, I assume. And just lost my notes there. And provides project management like this project where data on paper is turned into a data set. So Lindy, all yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Lindy, and I'm going to present our project on health records from the school health examination. The background for this project is that the recent year, the DNA Health Unit has been focusing on digital research, digital-born research data, and in the DNA we also have a great amount of data on paper that has a huge records, huge potential for researchers both within social science and health science. And we were addressed by a group of Danish health researchers who asked, what about the paper records from the school medical office? How can these records become a research resource for us? So we looked into that. And the DNA Health formed a proposal for a digitalization project in close collaboration with these researchers who first raised the question. This group of researchers became our external expert group on the whole project. And the aim of the project was to create a data set for a research proposal based on the paper records from the school health examination in the period from 1938 to 2012 from the northern part of Jutland, where both the rural and urban areas were included. The data set is quite huge, actually, because the sample size is 7,631 individuals. And this sample was collected after an archival investigation to find out what was preserved within the DNA. And the preservation legislation has changed over the years, so therefore it's not, the sample does not cover all the school and all the pupils at the whole period, but it still covers a lot. The record were first scanned, and afterward it was keyed into the program Epidata, and we selected the variables in close collaboration with the external expert group. Our results, the project is not done so far, but at the moment the result is that in April this year we handed in the data set for preservation. So now it's going to be tested and checked that everything is okay, and afterwards become available for researchers. And the researchers will find variables such as date of birth, social security number, birth weight, height and weight measured during the child's school years, parents' employment at the time of the child's school entry, number of siblings, and also the individual's numbers in the sibling group, vaccination registrations, and month and year for each of the registrations of the height and weight measure in the data set. So what's next? We're waiting for an approval of the data set, and when we get that, the data set will be preserved. And when the data set is preserved, it will be published into the DNA's data catalog, and researchers can apply for data. Furthermore, the lesson we learned from this project will be applied into new project regarding other archival data that was born on paper, and the process towards being put into play for use outside of the DNA. And hopefully the next project will be on conscription data. Thank you for your attention. And if you want to know more, please feel free to write me an email.
Thank you very much. Awesome projects here. All right, and next up we have Ricarda Brockman. So if you want to, Dr. Ricarda Brockman, if you'd like to go ahead and share your screen. Awesome. Okay, so Dr. Ricarda Brockman works as the Data Station Manager, Social Sciences at Data Archiving and Network Services in the Netherlands. Ricarda has been the RDA ambassador for the social sciences in the context of the RDA Europe project, which we will hear more about today. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Linda, for the nice introduction, and I'm really happy to be here and talk to you a little bit about what we did in the RDA Europe project. So as already mentioned, I want to tell you a little bit about what we did in this project, which has already ended, but I think what one of the things we did might still be a useful resource for people, which is a report on RDA for the social sciences and also for the humanities. So I assume that a lot of people know the Research Data Alliance, but just for those who don't, so the Research Data Alliance is a large organization or with the vision that they want to bring researchers and innovators together to openly share and reuse data across technologies, disciplines, and countries to address grand challenges of society. And they really want to build the social and technical bridges that enable open reuse of data. So it's a very broad and large organization. and it's member-based. And I think by now in April, it has more than 11,000 members from 145 countries. And I'm sure many of you might also be member of the RDA. So a lot of them are researchers and other data professionals, and really anyone can join who supports these guiding principles that they have. And the RDA has been sort of growing over years to a very large community that is doing a lot of different things that are very relevant for all of us in our community. And at the moment, there are 56 interest groups and 37 working groups in the RDA, which do a lot of different things. And what we noticed in this project is that, especially if you're a newcomer, that it's quite difficult to really see what is going on. There's lots of things that are going on, and lots of interesting work is being done. So that was why we decided to, as ambassador for the social sciences, create a report that is meant to guide people through the Research Data Alliance and give an introduction and also a little bit of a teaser in which groups might be interesting for a social science perspective. Let's see. So what we did within the RDA Europe project is that I assessed the groups and outputs from the RDA from a social science perspective to provide guidance for newcomers. And the DOI that is mentioned on the slide is a link to the report. And for iAssist, I now made an updated version. So I now have an overview of what is currently going on. I will show you just a couple of examples, but I really encourage people to look at the report and especially use it if you have people that are new to RDA and want to give them a sort of brief introduction. That is what it is meant to be used for. And I will share the link in a minute. So just to give you an overview in terms of some of the interest groups that might be interesting for social science researchers or scholars in the social sciences. So here are 3 examples that I think might be useful for people. For instance, the Social Science Research Data Interest Group has been established, I think last year, and they really work with a broad field of social sciences to exchange on issues particularly relevant for this domain, and also in collaboration with humanities. Then there is an ethics and social aspects of data group, which is interesting to people working with also sensitive data. And there's also an RDA and NISO group on piracy implications that will be interesting for people. And what I also noted is that just recently a sensitive data interest group has been established and is now in group revision. So these are examples of interest group, but the report lists an overview of all of the groups and gives a little bit of a guidance on which ones would be relevant for you to look into. And then in terms of working groups, which are much shorter in timescale than interest groups and often focused on specific outcomes, 3 example working groups that we think would be interesting from a social science perspective are, for instance, a group working on discipline-specific guidance for data management plans. And then there's also a Research Data Alliance COVID-19 group, specifically for the social sciences, and also a publishing data work group that will be interesting. And these are just some examples. So there's much more, of course, but this was just to give you an idea of sort of teasers that of the work going on in the RDA. And what we also did in the report is have a look at the outputs and also try and summarize some of the outputs that might be interesting for people. So I've just give 3 examples here as well. So what was interesting is that the COVID-19 group published recommendations and guidelines for data sharing in June. And these were created in a very short time scale, which was an amazing example of how the RDA works. So this is definitely interesting, I think, for our community. And then there's also a metadata standards directory, including information for the social sciences. And also this 11 quick tips for finding research data was something we thought was valuable for people to look at as examples for outcomes from the RDA. So if you would like to have more information, as this was just a brief teaser today, the report is available on Zenodo, and I will put the link in the chat in a minute. And I also would encourage people to check out the RDA website, which has a dedicated space for the social sciences, dedicated discipline space, also for other disciplines. So if you didn't know that was there, I think it would be a good place to start if you are interested to learn more about the RDA or join especially relevant things for the social sciences. And yeah, I'm really happy that you could give me your time, and you can always contact me for more information or follow me on Twitter. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Vanessa Higgins. So Vanessa, you could load up your screen share. Dr. Vanessa Higgins is Director of User Support and Training for the UK Data Service, where she leads the UK National Programme of Data Training for researchers and lecturers. She's also led on a data skills training projects for CESDA. At the University of Manchester, Vanessa co-leads the Data Skills and Training Research Group. Okay, thank you, Vanessa.
Hi, thanks. So I'm just going to tell you about the data skills modules that we've developed at the UK Data Service. So we launched them in 2019, and there weren't many things, online modules around like this at the time. However, there have been lots and lots since. They've become very prevalent because of the pandemic. So I'm just going to whiz through them, and then hopefully, if I've got time, give you a demo at the end. So, oops. There we go. So the aim of the data skills modules is to introduce the learner to key data types that are available from the UK Data Service for secondary analysis, and some basic skills to get people using those different types of data. So they're set very much at a beginner level. They're introductory. They can be used for self-learning or for teaching. They're 3 online modules, which each stand alone, and they're about 1.5 to 2 hours long, and they're just on the UKDS website, and you can just go in at any time, so they're kind of on-demand training. They're multimedia and interactive, so we've got a combination of slides, videos, exercises and quizzes, and where we can, we try to use open source software, so they're available for everybody. There's a great deal of thought went into the pedagogy behind these materials. So they're based very much on experiential learning. So learning through experience, reflecting on those experiences. So we used real data, obviously from the UK Data Service, in order to highlight the data and make the learner realise that the data means something, it is real. So we added interactive elements such as quizzes and exercises so that the user can reflect on their learning. And we wanted to motivate them by using all these different types of multimedia so they don't get bored while they're doing it. We've got case studies, so we've got videos, talking heads of researchers who have been using the data so that people can relate to them and see that you can actually do some research with these data. And finally, we incorporated elements of directional learning and locus of control. So users can either build up their skills by going through one module and it gets incrementally more difficult and more detailed into how to use the data, or they can just dip into certain bits of it through the contents at the beginning. So we've already got 3 modules. I've not put the links to them because we're about to update them. So we've got 3 shiny new modules that look much better now than they did before. We've also created a new module on using crime data with R. And we're creating a further 3 modules in the next 18 months. One will be on research data management, another one will be on computational social science, and another one will be highlighting some of the attitudinal data sets that we have. So these are the 3 types of modules we have at the moment: survey, longitudinal and aggregate. So if I click on the survey one, hopefully I've got a little bit of time left just to show you. Let me move that over. Can you see that? Hopefully. So you start the course, and then on the side here is there's several units in there you can see, and then with each unit you can just go into each one separately, and then you get some written text, you get videos in there to watch. You can check your understanding as you go along. So, for example, tells you if you're right or wrong, and you can take it again if you're wrong. So that kind of thing. And then right at the end, it's also got that kind of tables, how to do tables, recoding variables, and some exercises. And then right at the end, you can do an overall assessment of the full module, which takes 10 minutes, and then you can print out your certificate at the end with your name on, saying that you've completed the course. So yes, that's it really. I can keep showing you more. There we go. Frequency tables.
There was a question for the link in the chat, if you could share that, because these look really cool.
Sure, will do. Yeah. These are actually draft, so they've not been launched at the moment, so I probably shouldn't really be sharing them, but hey.
Awesome. Those are really cool. I'm sure that we'll have a lot of people who are really interested in that, especially the exploring crime surveys with R. I think that would be interesting to them to look at. Thank you very much, Dr. Higgins. Up next, we have Sven. So if we could, Sven could share. So Sven is a research associate and has been working for the Leibniz Information Center for Economics, ZBW, in Hamburg, Germany since 2010. His main tasks include the product management of the ZBW Journal Data Archive, a data repository for journals in economics. Together with a colleague, he also gives regular trainings to PhD and master's students on good scientific practice and reproducible research. And again, I just want to, before we start, please go ahead and start asking questions if you are interested in these, because a lot of people are from Europe. They may be wanting to go away, so because it's late there. So thank you very much.
Yes, great. Thank you for the introduction. So in my lightning talk, I'd like to answer 3 questions about our training courses for young economists. These questions are: why do we offer these trainings? What do we teach? And how do we conduct these trainings? And I'd like to conclude, if time permits, by sharing with you some feedback we received from our participants. And okay, let's see how this is working. Yes, okay. So why do we offer these training courses? So first of all, because data is so important in economics. Up to 75% of all the research literature is based on the analysis of data. So this is, of course, a very good reason. And at least in Germany, we have very limited subject-specific trainings on research integrity and reproducible research. And for that reason, we thought, well, it would be a great idea to have something like a training, a workshop, whatever, for young researchers. Yeah, and what do we teach in these hands-on trainings? So our participants learn about 3 major topics. And the first one is the most important one. So this is about good scientific practice and reproducible research. So this is the main focus. It takes approximately half of the time. And while the other 2 topics, so data policies of economics journals and also the requirements of the research funders, well, these are things that might also be available in many other RDM courses. But what we do is that we provide a lot of hands-on information, especially on documenting data and program code. So which commands should you use? What are best practices? And we do this together with IRI, the International Journal for Reviews in Empirical Economics. So this is a journal entirely dedicated to replications in economics. If you don't know the journal, please check it out. It's great. And yes, so a big part of our concept is, or the core of our training is that we are working in very small groups, so only 2 to 4 people. And all these participants get a data set and some simple research questions. Yeah, they should answer these research questions in approximately 1 hour and are asked to write 1 page about their findings. So this is the paper. Yeah. Subsequently, they upload their papers and their reproduction files in our data repository. And in a last exercise, one of the other groups tries to reproduce the findings of one of these groups. And we also encourage the participants to discuss alternative approaches to solve these research questions. And this is very helpful for all the participants. So first they hear about the theory, And then they have the exercises and other people try to reproduce their results. It's very, very good, very useful. So, okay, how do we conduct these trainings? So prior to the pandemic, we only offered these courses on site. They took 8 hours, so 1 full day, and we invited only 18 persons, and everyone needs a notebook and software. So we only used Stata, but we want to expand also towards more open software, especially R, for instance. And what we try to do is to have a 50-50 mixture of talks and practical exercises. And we also try to put the groups in different rooms, so everyone has, to solve their own problems. And this is very good. Yeah. And well, the whole thing goes in the direction that we try to simulate the research process in a nutshell. So in 1 day, from analysis to publication. So at the moment, we're only offering these courses online, but this will change, hopefully, and yeah. Okay, and we also received some feedback, and this is my last slide. At the end, we give a questionnaire to our participants and ask them 9 questions, and these are only 2. So the first one is about school grades for the workshop, and almost 95% rate our workshop as a very good or a good workshop. And we also asked them what they believe, how relevant is the content of this workshop for their recent and future academic work. And here almost 97% replied, yeah, it's important or very important. So this is very nice. And well, I'd like to thank you for your time and your attention. And if you have questions, please send me an email or also in the chat. Thanks.
Awesome. That was right on the nose. Good job. Great job. Yeah, really.
Yeah, perfect timing.
Project. Is it
okay.
You or me? Oh,
it's me. Yeah, we've obviously rehearsed this beforehand, so apologies everyone. But our next speaker is Veerle van der Nijden. So Veerle, if you want to get started, you're loading your presentation. So Veerle is research data management of the GCRF Drugs and Disorder Project at SOAS University London, responsible for implementing good data management practices across the project partnership, and more importantly, capacity building, training and support for researchers in Afghanistan, Myanmar, Colombia and the UK. She also works as research advisor RDM at KU Leuven University in Belgium within its newly established RDM Competence Centre. Thanks, Veerle.
Okay, thank you very much, Lawrence. I assume you can see my screen because I can't see it on the Wova, but I can see I'm sharing my screen, so I'm assuming the audience can see it, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so walking the talk in Myanmar and Afghanistan. Previous to becoming the research data manager for this research project at the start of 2019, I had been giving advice on good data practices for researchers for about 10 years. Now I have to make sure that the advice actually gets put into practice. So for initially 2 days, now 1 day a week, I'm data manager within the Drugs and Disorder Project based at the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. And the project works with 12 partner organizations in 4 countries, doing research on illicit drug economies in the context of war to peace transitions in Afghanistan, Colombia, and Myanmar. So plenty of challenges, obviously sensitive data we work with. A lot of the data that are collected are qualitative, from interviews, life histories, photographs, etc. Ethical and legal issues can be challenging. Data security is an important aspect, making sure that data are secure in all the transitions they go through, from the field to being transcribed, being translated, being used across the partnership, etc. Making sure that we don't put participants, but also the researchers at risk. And another challenge is the fact that some of the partners, especially in Myanmar and Afghanistan, have very basic IT infrastructure, very basic IT knowledge, often just running the research project off of some laptops and hard drives that they have. And the UKRI ESRC expect us to share the data at the end of the project. So 3 key aspects within this project. First of all, listen. listen to what the needs are of the partners involved in the project, because they were sometimes different from maybe what I had anticipated originally I would be working on with them. Making sure that we've got very practical tools that can be implemented that work for everyone. But fortunately, there's a big data community of all of these people here that I've gotten to know that I can also make use of when advice and guidance and suggestions is needed. So some of the examples of what we worked on and what we've achieved within the project. The importance is making sure that when we have solutions that they are open source tools that are easy and free to implement by the partners, especially those in Myanmar and Afghanistan. They might not have internet all the time, they might not have electricity all the time, etc. We need security systems. Glass Cubes, for example, is used across the partnerships and works really well as a system. It's GDPR compliant, everyone can access it, and it's used for sharing the data. Interestingly, the partners in Myanmar were really keen to have photo management solution, something that I hadn't really worked on before, but there comes then the JISC Research Data Management Group, where we can seek advice to hear what others might have as suggestions. And of course, the system had to run offline, very easy, open source. So we actually came up with Digicam and wrote then a guide on it. A data repository solution they're keen to develop as well. We still haven't achieved that. So any suggestions that people here in the audience might have of how to set up some basic data repository system in Myanmar or Afghanistan, let me know. The guidance is always published on the website so that also others can use it. And it's very practical, very easy language, easy to implement. Site visits were carried out, so I was lucky pre-March 2020 to be able to visit each of the 3 countries, to go and work with each of the organizations involved, provide hands-on training, but also really work with the data on the ground. So we did a lot of work on just practical organizing and tidying up, and a lot of data cleaning that was carried out, focusing on metadata, the capturing, which they actually did quite well in the field work, but just making sure that it all tied together. And interestingly, again, where the listening comes in, there was a very strong interest in learning about qualitative data analysis. Because whilst they were doing a lot of interviews and taking a lot of photographs, life histories, in their experience, it was often the UK-based researchers that were then actually doing the analysis, writing papers and reports. And it seemed to them very sort of mysterious how this was carried out. So we did some very basic, starting with very basic coding, moving on to using NVivos, putting together coding frameworks, etc. So capturing it all, whilst it is a very practical approach to implementing research data management, making sure that we have good data within the project that can be deposited with the UK Data Service and can then be made available for reuse. We've also put a lot of effort into what these partner organizations are really keen on achieving, is to build up their capacity for the long term. So it goes to, for them, beyond the project, even though we don't always have pandemics on our side, nor political situations in Myanmar that then really can cause quite a lot of havoc in what has been built up in 2 years. Is now a little bit sad to realize that it's become a lot more difficult for the partners to work within the current political framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very interesting project. It's exciting. Up next, we have Haley. Haley Mills. Sorry, Haley Mills is a senior metadata officer at CLOSUR, which is a consortium of UK longitudinal studies. Haley will be demonstrating the CLOSUR metadata portal, CLOSUR Discovery.
Hi everyone. Can you see my slides okay?
Yeah.
Yes, great. I'm Haley from CLOSUR, and I'll be doing a brief overview of CLOSUR Discovery. So CLOSUR is a consortium of UK longitudinal studies. These are our partners and our study partners. The studies are spread across the UK and are both national and regional, and they cover both social science and biomedical studies. So CLOSER's aim is to maximise the use, value and impact of longitudinal studies. And we do this by supporting research, creating resources and data products, providing training and building capacity and policy engagement, as well as through the creation and curation of a metadata portal, which helps researchers to find and appraise longitudinal data based on the metadata. So finding data for many of the longitudinal studies in the past was quite difficult, with information spread out and held separately, or may not have been viewable at all. So finding relevant data was time consuming. So at CLOSER, we wanted researchers to have one place where they could search across the studies. We also wanted to provide users with lots of context in order to be able to understand the data and variables, and also to make it easier to do cross-study comparisons. And so we created CLOSER Discovery. CLOSER Discovery is powered by a bespoke Cletica software and the Data Documentation Initiative metadata standard is what we use. I don't have time to do a full demo here, so I'm just going to show some of the key features of Discovery, but if you are interested, then do go to the site and try it out for yourself. You don't need to sign up. So CLOSER Discovery contains high-level metadata about the studies, sweeps, data collections and data sets, but we also document a huge amount of detail about the variables and questions, and both these are mapped to a controlled vocabulary of topics. So this allows the users to find the data they're interested in by browsing, searching, or exploring. So questions and variables are linked together, and variables include summary statistics. So this allows users to make more informed decisions about the usefulness of the data before they request or download it. One of the unique aspects of CLOSER Discovery is that all the questions are documented as part of the questionnaire as a whole. So we document statements and routing and sequences, etc. We've documented over 300 questionnaires so far. We think having the response domains and routing together in one place means that you can avoid cross-tabbing data sets or working through or searching through PDFs to try and find population of the data, for example. We also document the provenance of derived variables. So questions are linked to variables, and any further variables derived from them can be clearly seen. So knowing what variables went into creating the derived variable means that you don't have to trawl through syntax or code to try and work that out. Lastly, you can save your questions and variables into a list, which can be published and shared through a persistent identifier, like a mini DOI, and you can also download your list as a PDF or XML. We also have an API, which can be used to query the metadata for potential reuse. So CLOSER Discovery is not a finished product, and we are continually adding more content, including more COVID-19 metadata, as well as adding new functionality, including the ability to view variables across studies and sweeps. So if you saw Catherine and Sanders talk about NACDA, we'll be doing something similar with Discovery studies. And I'd also recommend watching our longer webinar on the portal if you want to see it, more details about it, or follow us on Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would say if you want to share any of these things, both in the chat, but also if you share your projects in our Whova space or on our listserv, that would be great, so more people can know about it. It's the awesome projects you're doing. I think I'm up next.
Well, apparently we have a video now.
Yeah.
So I have a note here that you're to start the recording. So while you're doing that, I'll introduce Emilia. Gallagher. Amelia is Applied Social Science Librarian at Cornell University's Albert Einstein Library, where she provides research support for faculty and students in the areas of data literacy, data management, and evidence synthesis. Amelia has a BA in History and an MS in Library and Information Science, both from the University of South Florida. Beyond Cornell, Amelia is an active member of the Research Data Access and Preservation Association, RDAP. So when you're ready, press play.
And I apologize in advance if this isn't really loud, but I'm just making sure it plays okay.
Researchers and problem solvers. Hello everyone, my name is Amelia Gallagher, and today I'm going to talk to you about a day of data, collaborating with campus partners to host an event for data experts, researchers, and problem solvers across the university. This poster turned lightning talk is also co-authored by Wendy Kozlowski and Jonathan Bowen. So what is a day of data? It's an event for anyone working with data, from the beginner to the expert, a student to a researcher, and everyone in between. It's an event to share experiences around working with data, find solutions for data-related problems, and to learn effective tools and techniques in a workshop. It's also a great event to network with colleagues from across the university and meet those folks from a different college or department who also might be working with data. The Day of Data event can include presentations, lightning talks, discussion panels, and workshops. We were inspired by similar events such as Yale University's Day of Data, University of Alberta's GIS Day, and the University of Minnesota's Day of Data. So our goal was to bring together members of the Cornell research community who are interested in data-related topics such as data discovery, reproducible research, metadata and documentation, data sharing, and data reuse, just to name a few. We wanted to bring together this Cornell research community to discuss how we can better support and put into practice these principles and data-related topics that we were discussing. We also wanted to provide a networking space for students and faculty members across various disciplines working with data to come together and meet, and also for those folks to meet us, the data service providers. Our goal was also to host this annually each year during some type of fall break so students would be able to attend. So here's what we did. In 2019, we hosted our first Day of Data. It was an in-person event held over one day. Our theme was Any Person, Any Data, Any Study, which is a play on our motto or mission of Any Person, Any Study, and we added in Any Data. We had roughly 85 people attend. We had up to 30 people at our workshops. In 2020, we shifted to virtual, and we actually had to postpone it to January 2021. We held it over 2 half days over Zoom, and this theme was scholarship through collaboration. We were hoping that folks would be able to share their research projects that were being affected by COVID and how collaboration played into it. We had 81 people attend the keynotes, 45 to 65 at lightning talks, 24 to 36 at panels, and 8 to 18 people at workshops. And here's what worked well for us. It was great to have buy-in from library leadership. They were able to fund us and sponsor the event. We also benefited from having a key planning committee, folks who were interested in hosting and planning the logistics of the event who could come together and work on this leading up to the event. We also dipped into our pool of campus experts and service providers to help us curate and plan the workshops. We had a great balance between those practical skills someone can learn in a workshop and those panel presentations or lightning talks where it was just sharing and presenting on research. We kept it discipline agnostic, and we provided a free lunch to attendees, which is always helpful. We did learn a couple things along the way that we will think about when we want to improve the event. So there are some downsides to in-person. There's a lot of logistics that go into reserving rooms, helping our attendees navigate set of rooms, find a building on campus they've never been to before, get to the next room in the session, and of course, having more people register than attend. And for full transparency, we had a budget of $5,000 for catering and conference center room booking, which really helped us. The second time that we hosted the event, we split up into subcommittees. We found that worked a lot better for us than having one major planning committee. And then we created a steering committee of those subcommittee chairs to make the final decisions. We also had some benefits from hosting it virtually the second time. It was a free event, both for us to plan and for attendees, so much lower costs, better timing, a little bit more accessible for people to just click on a link than to find a specific room in a building. And we were able to reach a slightly larger audience. For us, what worked was always keeping an eye on the campus calendar. Depends on your audience, but if you're at a university, consider scheduling these day of data during a university scheduled break so students don't have conflicts with classes. So here's how you can do this too. I've given you some examples of very large events or large scale events, and it doesn't need to be always done on a large scale. You can definitely scale this down to fit your institution and audience's needs. It can be done in a half day, one afternoon. Point to similar institutions or organizations events when trying to make the case for having your own day of data. It's great to include student and faculty research, and maybe consider having a faculty as your keynote. Definitely make sure to leverage services or units on your campus or organizations for those workshop speakers and help with planning the event. And make sure it's an inclusive and welcoming event to those data newcomers, those data beginners who are really interested in learning more. The importance of these events, they really help create community around data. They can highlight campus partners and service providers working on campus. It's a great venue for students to share their research. It can connect researchers with campus experts and help them with their data problems. It's a great way to provide outreach to various communities around campus, and it can communicate the value of data services to university leadership or administration. And this is one of our anecdotes from our feedback surveys. The Day of Data was full of learning and discovery. Kudos to the team who put this memorable event together, and this could be you one day. Thank you all for listening. My email is up on the screen. I'm happy to take questions through email after the session. Hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.
Okay, so up next we have Rajuta Amarji. Do you want to share your screen? Oh, there you go. Awesome, thank you. Rajuta is the Director of Data Curation at the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research, ICPSR, at the University of Michigan. Prior to working at ICPSR, Rajuta worked as a research assistant in clinical and nonprofit research settings in a variety of roles, including data collection, entry management and verification, and data analysis. Rajuta has been with ICPSR for 9 years, including roles as a data curator and a data curation supervisor in the areas of early childhood and criminal justice. And she's currently responsible for the ICPSR data curation unit efforts in production, archiving, and dissemination of high quality data for secondary analysis. Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, thank you for that introduction, Linda. So this presentation is on the ICPSR data curation levels, and it is by Annie Beaubien and me. So ICPSR implemented data curation standards and best practices through the curation levels back in July of 2018. And as you can see from this table, ICPSR's approach involved multiple levels of curation, with each level tying to specific curation activities and timeframes. All studies released by ICPSR, regardless of curation level, have had a full disclosure risk review, a complete metadata record created, a DOI that persistently identifies the data, and an ICPSR codebook. Curation level does not necessarily indicate data quality of the data we release, but rather it's an internal tool, and it indicates ICPSR staff effort and curation activities required to release the study with maximum potential for secondary use. So this presentation is a follow-up of our lessons learned as we continue to refine these curation levels. We'll cover insights from internal stakeholders, how the levels have evolved over the past few years, and the use of the curation levels in other settings. So over the last 3 years, we've made a handful of changes to the curation levels, and you can see some of the major changes we've made listed here. The majority of these changes are to ensure that the data is converted properly and that the value is preserved, and also to clarify expectations and enhance communication among the 3 units at ICPSR that use the curation levels pretty frequently.
We were able to conduct a survey on the curation levels to learn the opinions of a variety of stakeholders. We received 50 responses from 3 different units and were able to conduct 8 follow-up interviews to gain greater insight. As you can see in this chart, over 75% of respondents agreed to some extent with the statement that the levels have improved our data quality. At ICPSR, our data quality is of the utmost importance, so this is a huge benefit to having the levels. In addition, 88% of respondents agreed to some extent that the levels have made the curation process more straightforward. Curation is often seen as a mysterious and confusing process at ICPSR, so having increased understanding of curation outside of just the curation unit is valuable for a number of reasons and has led to improved internal communication about our processes.
So as Annie mentioned, we conducted follow-up interviews, and this slide shows some of the key themes we observed. So overall, we found the curation levels were really beneficial for both communicating internally within the ICPSR, as Annie mentioned, and also externally with sponsors and other stakeholders. It also provides us with a really good baseline to review and assess data that's deposited with us. And our main challenges are continuing to refine the curation levels to meet data user needs, and also to provide flexibility and ongoing training in conjunction with the levels internally at ICPSR.
Looking forward to next steps, we believe that the levels can provide a framework for other data archives. All archives are unique and have different capacities for data curation, but we think that the concept of the levels allows individual archives to customize it to their needs. And as Rajuda mentioned, within ICPSR, we learned several areas where people believe the levels can be improved, particularly looking at greater flexibility to address data user needs. We are planning on making further improvements to address these specific concerns. In addition, looking ahead to new data types, we want to ensure that the levels can apply to a wide variety of data forms, including qualitative data and programs like GIS.
And that's it. Thanks, everyone. And please feel free to contact Annie and I if you have any comments or questions for us. You can also leave us any questions in the chat.
Lovely, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Melissa Chung. So Melissa Chung is a science and engineering research librarian at the University of Ottawa. She's been involved in various projects related to research data management for 6 years. She's participated in collaborative Canadian initiatives, including the Portage Network's Research Intelligence Expert Group and the Canadian RDM Survey Consortium. Most recently, Melissa has been acting as the project lead in the analysis of the consortium's national data sets for publications. Melissa.
Hello. Can you hear me all right? I think, okay, I should be unmuted. Hello, my talk is about a multi-institutional survey project. A consortium of Canadian universities surveyed researchers to identify research data management practices and their needs for support to meet RDM policy requirements from national funding agencies. 13 universities participated in the study, which was conducted between 2015 and 2019. The data collected from the surveys were compiled to create a national data set that can be used to characterize the data culture in Canada and inform how we design RDM services. Commonalities in how researchers manage their data give a general picture that can be used to develop services that are applicable to the majority of Canadian researchers. However, tailoring your approach to RDM support by targeting each discipline differently will allow you to have conversations that resonate with specific audiences. You can use the same language or terminology as your audience, provide relevant examples, and talk about discipline-specific funding expectations. You can also prioritize support for problem areas that each discipline is most concerned with and modify services and training to match the level of experience each discipline has with different RDM topics. So here we used a 3-color scale to visualize our survey data by discipline. Each column corresponds to a particular discipline, and the rows represent responses to the survey question about types of research data. This is a way to quickly identify how disciplines manage their data differently. We can compare differences between disciplines by looking at the data across the rows, or we can look at individual columns to create a profile with specific disciplinary behaviors in RDM. Here's an example of a disciplinary researcher profile that can be created with our survey data. These profiles will be made publicly available for download when we publish our data and survey findings. It's important to note that these disciplinary profiles are generalizations and they do not represent all researchers in the discipline. They're meant to be used as conversation starters with researchers or as a starting point for service planning and development. When we take a closer look at the engineering profile as an example, a few key practices stand out. Researchers in engineering are more likely to use instrument-specific data. They tend to use multiple data storage solutions, and they reported the highest use of computer hard drives for data storage compared to other disciplines. On the other hand, they aren't relying on shared drives and university or departmental servers as frequently as other storage solutions. So with these key points in mind, we can tailor our conversations with engineering researchers about their data storage habits to align with best practices. In particular, we may want to encourage them to make use of institutional storage solutions like departmental servers, which may be backed up automatically to prevent data loss. When it comes to data sharing, engineering researchers are concerned with the need to publish results first, intellectual property rights, plans to file a patent, and restrictions on sharing for commercial reasons. Despite these concerns, they indicated an openness to data sharing, specifically related to the benefits of training new researchers and for collaborative scholarship. If we can help to mitigate their concerns, perhaps that will result in an increase in data sharing. For example, we can help develop plans that eliminate or reduce potential barriers to data sharing, including ways to control how and with whom the data is shared, or advising on data agreements in contracts with industry partners. To summarize, the data we gathered provides insights that can help prioritize service development and plan for infrastructure that will meet researcher needs. The researcher profiles we created can be used to prepare for RDM consultations or presentations for specific groups. They give an overview of general talking points relevant to researchers in different disciplines and can also be useful in understanding the disciplinary context of RDM for training initiatives, conversations with administrators and other campus stakeholders, and more. In the near future, we are working on publishing our results along with the underlying data and the researcher profile cards. So that's our project in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you want to learn more about the Canadian RDM survey, you're welcome to contact me via email. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. So next we have Alicia Kubas. Alicia, if you want to share your screen. Alicia is the Government Publications and Data Librarian, as well as the Regional Depository Coordinator at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Her research interests include data reference and access to government information and data. And Jenny McBurney, who's presenting with her, is a social sciences librarian at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Her subject areas include economics and political science, and she also supports research services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. So I will be presenting today about the landscape of state-level open data portals in the US. So first, to give a little background on how this project came to be. So as the government information librarian and our kind of main data reference librarian at the university, I like to be aware of all of the main access points to government data, especially state data. And so I was curious about, in Minnesota, what are the various access points? So I am familiar with Minnesota's open data portal, and I quickly realized that it's really not great. There's a lot of broken links. It's never updated. It looks like they created it and then just never really did anything to really invest in it long term. And it made me really wonder, are we unique in this? Are other states way ahead of us? Do other states have even an open data portal at all? So what really is the landscape here? And then of course, it made me also think about what could our role be as the academic library at a public land-grant university in the state to potentially partner and work with state agencies to curate open data and make that more accessible. So my next step, of course, was let's dig into this and make it a research project, which I did. So in 2019, I surveyed all 50 states, and I have to admit I didn't include DC because of the list I was working off of, but I do need to go back and add it. And I redid the data collection, or updated it, I should say, in 2021. And that's because the landscape is changing so quickly that the data needed to be refreshed to get a more accurate picture. So I quickly realized as I was looking in other states for an open data portal or some kind of website that there are other types of access points as well. And so I recorded those to get a bigger picture of this environment state by state. So I not only noted down if the state had an open data portal or website, kind of a broad portal, I also looked to see if they had a transparency website, which is a little bit different. And you'll often hear these called checkbooks, where they just have the kind of budget and finance data for the state. And then thirdly, a geospatial open data portal. So you'd often see these individually in the state as well. And so then for each of those, I also recorded the launch dates, what platform they were on, as well as if it was hosted data or just aggregated, where it's just records or links out. I also researched each state to see if there was some kind of mandate in terms of needing to have an open data portal in that state, whether via legislation or executive order. And then I also recorded if the state had some kind of chief information officer or equivalent position. And then at this point, I brought in my colleague Jenny to start digging into the data, and you're just going to see the barest surface level here. But first, does the state have an open data portal? And so out of the 50 states, 30 do have some kind of portal or website. This says nothing, of course, about the quality. Then looking at transparency websites, many more have some kind of checkbook or transparency site. 47 out of the 50 have something like this that's separate. And these were much more popular to start doing about 10 or 15 years ago. I think this was a big push in government to have that kind of transparency piece to give this type of budget information to the public and make it easy to access. And thirdly, geospatial portals. So again, many more than the open data portals. 44 out of the 50 have some kind of separate geospatial portal. And I think, again, these have been much more prevalent because there's been a bigger priority around geospatial data than just sort of broad state agency data. And then turning to open data portal mandates at the state level. So if you remember back, 30 states have some kind of open data portal or website. 13, but only 13 states have some kind of mandate, 9 via legislation and 4 via executive order. And then finally, next steps, there's a lot more data to dig into, so we want to do some analysis on that and hopefully draft an article, and probably are going to have to do another survey of the states to make sure that data is fresh. And please feel free to email me with questions, or I'm happy to answer questions in the chat. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you. Okay, so our next presentation is from Vanessa Unkeles Perez. So Vanessa, if you would like to start your presentation, screen share. So prior to her position as metadata librarian at IPSR, Vanessa was metadata librarian at the University of Alabama and metadata assistant at Indiana University. She most enjoys the educational and collaborative aspects of the work. Thank you.
Thank you. So some background on this. ICPSR was in development of a curation tool that we call the metadata editor. And we wanted to solicit feedback from our users because it had been quite a while since we had done that. This took place in summer of 2018. And I wanted to give a thanks to our intern, Amanda Jung. She was really helpful and just a pleasure to work with through this process. So our learning objectives, what did we want to achieve from this? We wanted to find out what was missing from ICPSR metadata, what was redundant or unnecessary, what practices or policies we could improve on, and if we were meeting the FAIR guidelines. During the first week, Amanda learned about user experience research, and I reviewed her work. The original plan was to prepare a survey to send out to the users and then to do the user interviews around the same time. However, changes were made after meeting with some colleagues at ICPSR. And the advice from that meeting was to recruit 5 to 6 users from the University of Michigan to hold a focus group. And then based on the feedback from the focus group, that would help us craft our survey. And then we would send out the survey to our users. So recruiting users for the focus group, there was a list of potential internal users that was provided for us. And then an email was sent out to them asking them to sign up. There were a total of 5 tasks that were created, and they ranged in difficulty and specificity, everything ranging from finding all the studies in which Gallup is the data collector to, for a specific study, finding specific fields. The focus group session was then held on August 16th, 2018. There were a total of 5 users who attended the session. And of the 5 tasks, each one took about 10 minutes. And we had some things that we actually learned through the session just about focus groups was that sometimes it was hard to move on to the next task without feeling like we were interrupting the user because they had a lot of really important information to share with us. And a couple questions weren't clear to the users, so they had to be reworded. Recruiting users for the survey. They were recruited through both references and ICPSR's membership list, and there were more than 40 users who were selected. The questions in the survey were based off of feedback from the focus group, the learning objectives, and previous research. The survey was designed on SurveyMonkey and distributed through email, and there were a total of 18 respondents. So our data came from various sources, the focus group, which was qualitative data, and then the survey, which was both qualitative and quantitative data. For the focus group data, we used the summation method to organize and present the data. And for the survey data, we used the analyze method to do the same. So for the results of the survey, we learned what the most frequent tasks of our users are. And those were using the search bar, looking at the study metadata, and narrowing down their search using facets. And interestingly, most used features and the most important features were the same. Those are title, summary and subject terms, and geographic coverage. So while we asked about pre-existing fields, we wanted also to have give users an opportunity to have input about potential new fields. You can see here the majority of respondents preferred to add a geographic representation field along with the pre-existing field of geographic coverage. And again here, majority of respondents preferred to divide the pre-existing sample field into subsections. So overall, involving community was really helpful for us in our decision making. It informed us about our users' behavior, what they find useful and important. It helped us to fill in blind spots. Many people at ICPSR have been there for many years, and so it was really helpful to have an outsider's perspective. Also, most of our users wanted more detailed metadata compared to a smaller number of core fields. And this one went against what we were expecting, so that was really exciting to see. However, there are still obstacles to implementation. ICPSR has not prioritized the metadata editor within the curation workflow. Other ICPSR projects have priority, and there are limitations of resources, namely time and staff. But I believe that once this is implemented, users will be very pleased with this because we've involved them from very early on in the process. And it's also my recommendation that moving forward, that we continue to involve our users since this was such a helpful process. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. Really interesting to hear about that project. And up next, we have Anne Glusker. So Anne is the Sociology, Demography, and Quantitative Research Librarian at the University of California, Berkeley. She has worked in medical, special, and public libraries. Before changing careers to librarianship, she was a public health epidemiologist. Answering data requests, her current research interests include open data, data literacy, librarian and library staff morale, and librarian career paths. Thank you very much, Anne.
Thanks, Linda. Hopefully you can hear and see what you need to. So this presentation is an abbreviated version of one that I gave at the 2020 ICPSR Data Fair. Details are on the next slide. That was an hour. This is 5 minutes, and I realized I promised a little too much. So if I go too fast or if you have questions, please feel free to contact me. So here's what I'll talk about in today's session, and the big 3 questions about whether we should be aiming at having all librarians be data savvy. Can we? We can, but only with the broad definition of data and of data savvy, with respect for persons and their varying connections to and experiences of data. Must we? In my opinion, in some settings, we may need to expect that people can step up to changes in their roles and can learn to help patrons in basic ways that have a data component. But if that changes the fit of the job to the person, that should be supportively addressed. Should we? It depends. Improving skills in our data-driven world can give people a sense of control, but if we push or rush the process, we risk losing more than we gain, in my opinion. So I want to start with critical data literacy. It's not enough to be able to work with a spreadsheet. We need to know more about where the data come from, what they can be used for, and in fact, all the same things that we as librarians teach people about evaluating any resource. Data mystification is real, and it contributes to the perceived divide between data librarians and non-data librarians. A divide, by the way, that is not sharp, but actually a continuum. Mainly, I want to remind all of us that we already know how to do this. The reason I'm saying that it's a continuum is that many librarians already use and help patrons use data without acknowledging that that's actually what they're doing. So I believe that each person should be able to choose their own approach to this issue. If you're working with a librarian who identifies themselves as data hesitant, here's a list of some questions that they can ask, and it actually couldn't hurt for all of us to ask ourselves these questions too. Being a data savvy librarian is cool, but there are many other ways to be data connected. If you do have a librarian colleague that wants to dive in, civic data is a great starting place. I'm referring here to the US context, but I think it's more widely applicable as well. Using civic data, you can find smaller data sets, and the questions that they're answering are ones that we can all engage with and understand. You also generally do not have to worry about pesky weighting and confidence intervals. Another way to engage people with data is to connect them with their own library's assessment data. If you understand the data from its very inception, it's much easier to analyze it. I also want to highly recommend this grid of data engagement opportunities that was created by Megan Sapp Nelson and Abigail Gobin. The transferable skills that are in column A remind us again that all of us as librarians already know how to do much of this. And then looking at columns D, E, and F, you'll find lots of ideas for activities and programs to get yourself and also your data hesitant librarians up to speed. If you're interested, I've actually created a template for an hour-long workshop to use with librarians who want to get started with data. As you heard, my background is in public health, and I worked in Seattle, so it starts with the Washington State birth certificate. And what I do is I explain the process from the mom's bedside to the data set, and then move on from there. And then here's just a list of ideas for training for beginners, data beginners, or people who want more experience with data. And of course, you'll be getting the slides, so the links will all be available to you. And then for those of us who are data savvier, there's some more options. Still, for many of us, beginning options. I'm not getting into sort of advanced analysis, R, Python, or anything like that. There's just a lot out there. And then I also promised in this really short talk that I would talk about how people could implement inclusive data initiatives. What was I thinking? 5 minutes. But so I would send you to the engagement grid. But I would also, I think you're getting the idea that I believe in encouraging individual approaches. So goal setting for individuals. So when I gave my ICPSR talk, I actually announced, to try to hold myself accountable, my own 1, 3, and 6 month goals. And I'm happy to report that more than 6 months later, I've done the first 2, but I'm sad to report I have not done the third yet, but summer is coming. And then finally, there's all these materials and a slightly longer video version of this talk, because I was worried about my internet, are at the link that you see. And I really welcome you to contact me and ask more questions. And I'm looking forward to Mandy's data literacy interest group. And hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Anne. And I'll give you a +1 on the data feminism book. That's a fantastic book for everyone to read. So, and the talk you gave at ICPSR was great too. So I encourage people to take a look back at that. I believe there is a recording of it on ICPSR's website. So thank you. So we've all been waiting since 2015 for an update of this presentation. How's that for an opening, Ashley? This is Ashley Jester. She is an assistant director at Stanford Libraries, where she leads the Lianma Science Library and the Terman Engineering Library. An expert on data and applied research methods, Ashley directs a team that provides research support for students and faculty in Stanford's nationally ranked science and engineering programs. Outside of Stanford, Ashley serves on the administrative committee of IASSIST, is an birder, and thankfully for us, an enthusiastic amateur sommelier. So, hand it over to you.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, everybody here, it's me again with the wine. I hope that this isn't becoming too boring. And first of all, I do want to apologize to everyone. There are not going to be any 3D visualizations here. I tried and tried to make something look the way that I wanted to, and I just could not. So I decided to scrap that idea. But while I was working on that and looking at some of the data as a network, it took me in a different direction, which is where I will end this talk. But first, I want to review where I came from for those of you who may not have seen this before. Ooh, I had not clicked there. All right, here we go. Oh. So the project began on December 24th, 2007, Christmas Eve. My then boyfriend, now husband, and I were drinking a bottle of wine, and we got an idea to start a data collection project. And the data collection project was driven solely by the idea that we wanted to stop wasting our money drinking wine we didn't like. So we wanted to drink better wine, and we were inspired by the folks from the Wall Street Journal who have now retired, the 2 Wall Street Journal wine columnists who were married to one another, who encouraged folks to just every day drink the wine that they liked, pay attention to what they were drinking, take notes for themselves. And so we started this project with a very simple sheet, recording really basic information about the bottles of wine, the grape varietal, who made them, where they came from, if they were imported, who the US importer was. A very simple score. We started with a categorical score that we later converted to numbers. And the thing that's always been an element is the detailed tasting notes, written in a narrative form that we discuss and talk with one another as we are recording it. And so we started in December of 2007. I first presented on this in Minneapolis in 2015, and we had about 400 bottles in our collection then. By 2019 in Sydney, we'd climbed to about 745 bottles, so you can tell what the pace was going. And yes, in May of 2021, we have about 947 bottles on our list. Yes, you heard that right. Rather than embarrass myself with the kind of cumulative chart that I know that you have all come to appreciate in this last year, I will let you excellent folks work that math out for yourself. But you know, what is there to say? What happened? Well, I think we all know what happened. COVID and school closures and work disruptions and everyone suddenly being willing to more openly celebrate their drinking, it made it a lot easier to open more bottles of wine than we had in the past. And so that's where we are. So I also realized in reviewing my slides from Sydney that I had done a great disservice on all of you. I had presented very many poor quality pie charts. I will not be doing that this time, but I do want to just quickly review, because there's some themes that are settling into place as we are completing this project now, going on more than 10 years. One is about the ratios of the types of wine we consume. When we started, when I first presented, we were definitely always a red heavy family, but we really ramped up our consumption of red once we moved to California in 2016, which is what you saw in Sydney. But we're really settling down, I think, into an overall pattern. This is the distribution of types by all the wines in our data. And we are, pretty steady at about 2/3 red, About 5% of the wine we consume is rosé, so I think I'm pretty proud of that. Rosé holding out its own, and the whites there rounding out the rest. Those who remember my talk from Sydney will remember that I talked quite a bit about skew, and this donut chart was for those of you who love donuts more than pies. I want to just talk a little bit more about skew here today, because I think it illustrates two important things about the patterns of consumption that my husband and I have. And this is a histogram of all of the bottles of wine by major region. So that's countries and states, US states and countries. And what you see here is that we do have a place that we tend to favor, California, but we also sample wines from a lot of different places. We have wide ranging tastes and have sampled from many areas, but we do tend to return to our old standards frequently. And that's true both globally and locally, which you see in California itself. We have a favorite region in California, and that's the Russian River Valley. So looking at all of this, I think the big question that I had that I wanted to share with all of you today was, where is the value in the wine? What's the best value of wine? So what we came up with was using the scores from winesearcher.com. To be consistent, we then took the scores that we gave it and came up with a points per dollar ratio. So this is the histogram of our points per dollar ratio. You see that it's centered right around 2, which is actually not a terrible ratio. And here is, I think, the more important piece of it, which is where is the best value in California? I keep going too fast. And that actually is the Central Coast. So these are major regions. So the North Coast actually includes Napa and Sonoma, which are the places that get the most attention. But the Central Coast includes places like Santa Barbara and Santa Lucia Highlands, where the wine is a little bit cheaper, but tastes just as good. And so you see that the price per dollar value goes high. And I know I'm over time, but I do want to say, I want to introduce the Jester line as a concept, which is if your points per dollar value ratio falls below 1, throw that area out. Don't buy any wine that doesn't give you at least 1 point for every dollar you spend on it. And with that said, I can't wait to drink with all of you. Here are my recommendations for the summer. Please ask me questions. And in lieu of it being able to give you a 3D visualization, I am promising this time to publish the data set so that all of you can dig around in it yourself. And with that, thank you. Drink better wine.
Thank you very much. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, to all of our presenters for your excellent projects, your excellent work, for keeping them in time so we could get everyone in. And we are going to I'm going to hand it over to Meryl Brodsky, I believe, now.
Yes, I'm going to introduce Meryl and give some background. So for the people who this is your first iAssist, it wasn't really well advertised before this, but every year iAssist holds a paper competition, and then we announce the winner during our annual conference. So we first got our paper competition submissions way back when, and then obviously 2020 happened. And so we're finally getting around to announcing the winner of the 2020/2021 iAssist paper winner. And so huge thanks to our paper competition review team, which was Ari Goffman, Ann Glusker, Rob Sapel, Winnie Nakasa, and then Meryl Brodsky, who is going to announce the winner of the paper competition right now.
Hi, everybody. The reviewers wrote, "This topic is important and the paper is well written. The use of the 2 cases to explore issues in geodata policy is a very effective way to show the difficulties in navigating US geodata. It highlights the consequences of local decision-making and the discussion of GIS as expert. This type of historical policy analysis could be applied to other areas as well." And the paper is Open Geospatial Data, a comparison of data cultures in local government by Karen Majewich, Jamie Martindale, and Melinda Kernick. Congratulations. Many thanks to everyone who contributed papers. They were all really good this year and a pleasure to read. So thank you very much. And thanks again to the review team.
So now we have what everyone has been waiting for, which is San's closing remarks. So thank you. Before we hand it over to San, On behalf of the staffs, I would like to say thank you so much to everyone for attending. We are so incredibly thrilled with the level of active engagement that everyone brought to this. And thank you so much for embracing with us the weird. We talked a lot about how it was just weird, but luckily IA Sisters are great. So if anyone was just gonna embrace the weird with us, with like the virtual environment, it would be the IA Sisters. So we'll hand it over to San. But Steph T, if there's anything you wanted to add, I just wanted to say from both of us, thank you so much for participating, and we hope you had an excellent conference.
Yeah, well said. Happy to hand it over to San, but thank you everybody. It's been amazing. And we hope to see you next time.
Okay, so now it's me, huh? Okay, so this, again, for those of you who have not attended an in-person conference, this would be the time when we would run around and give flowers and all shower all kinds of love on the Stephanies who deserve it to the moon and back. I cannot thank them enough for being willing to do this job for 2 years straight. So we'll give them appropriate kudos in the closing. And it would also be a place where we would have the closing song and slideshow of photographs that would have been taken throughout the conference. And so we have a long tradition of people wandering around and taking fun pictures, both in the sessions where we're learning stuff and engaging in these great conversations, as well as in some of the extracurricular activities, sometimes involving pool tables that I still have not learned to conquer, or other, some of Ashley's wine may have actually been cataloged as part of these adventures. But we didn't really have that opportunity because I don't know about you, there's only so many screenshots of Zoom that you can find entertaining. So the slideshow itself had to be a little bit different, and so did the closing. We can't do the banner handoff where we go from one location's local arrangements committee to the next location's local arrangements committee because we don't have a location either right now or for next year because we're still working that out. So we don't have our regular conference slideshow. We don't have the banner handoff. We didn't have all of the people who can actually sing get to have the opportunity to get together and write a song that was tied to the location that we're not in. And so there was going to be a really boring closing remarks because you guys are already sick of hearing me talk. And then one of the staffs, I believe it was Ms. Telly, dared me to stare into the camera and to sing the final song. I can't walk away from that. So I will tell you that this has been festering in my brain now for weeks. I have tormented every member of my family. My dog is really tired of listening to this. I will pretend that I can actually sing under normal circumstances, which is a lie, but it is going to be made even worse and less tuneful because I have a cold on top of everything else. Remember colds? Like I don't know about you guys, but I haven't been sick since the whole mask thing started and the fact that I don't leave my house. So hopefully I won't cough up a lung and hopefully you will be able to somewhat recognize the tune. 10,000 thanks to everyone who submitted photographs to the website because you're now going to see them. This is our celebration of the IAssist community over the last year. Exactly what Steph said. I can't imagine a better group of people to have tried something different and just dug in and said, yep, let's do this. And so now I'm going to try something different. I'm going to dig in. And yes, I know it's being recorded. And I got to tell you, I have friends here in Rochester that would pay big bucks for the link to this. So here we go. I have done this like 50,000 times in practice, and I know I'm still going to screw it up. So hopefully, let's see if we push play. Tell me if you can hear this. All right, good. Now I have to actually share the slides. Ha! That would be nice. All right, I'm gonna go over here so I can look at you. I'm gonna do, resume share. You can see the slide? Excellent. I'm gonna try and bring the music back. And it's time. I'm done. Did you see my bow? What more do you want from me? Thank you guys so much for everything. I really, really appreciate this community. I can't think of a better group of people, even though you're crazy enough to elect me as president and then let me sing to you. What the hell? I'm really, really going to be interested in figuring out how to make next year work for everyone. I would love to say it's going to look like it used to, because heaven knows I'm desperate for that. But keep your eyes open for calls for discussions about what things should look like and what things might be able to look like. And please stay safe, stay sane, and I look forward to seeing you all in 3 dimensions sometime, I hope soon.